Well, I hope everyone had a reasonably good Thanksgiving. I say reasonably because there are limits, I think. But I understand from Kathy right before the service that we had about 50 people for the Thanksgiving meal here, which is phenomenal and wonderful. So at least that group had a good time. So we are now turning the corner, and I must note that for many people, Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays are kind of a mixed bag. For many people, it's a joyous, upbeat occasion, and for some, it's one of the most difficult times of the year. And let us all hold that paradox in our heart and mind as we go through and into and beyond this holiday season. The established religious traditions of Christianity in forms of the Catholic branch and the Protestant branch and the Jewish faith, those traditions have primarily shaped our religious awareness of life. They have steadily lost their credibility and their power in our society over the last 40 years, easily. The process of science becoming more and more a prominent part of society, which one could roughly date around 1700 at the beginning of the Enlightenment, and carrying forward that process has led to religious identity being questioned, religious beliefs being questioned. And we live in that context. And I know that we don't think of our historical context a lot, but you and I, when we gather here and walk into this space, are entering a point in history where religion, in a conventional sense, has been in decline for decades in a very serious way, as I'll mention a little further on in the service. The religious traditions I mentioned have struggled to adapt to the changes in the understanding of life caused by science and related developments. Right now, for example, the United Methodist Church, the faith I grew up in, divided over the issue of human sexuality. And it is in a state of dissolving or splitting up. A lot of turmoil has been created by the fact that science permeated our society to a higher and higher degree. Religions generally, the Catholic and the Protestant faiths, and even the Jewish faith to a certain extent, have not done well in dealing with the shift in our understanding of the world that science ushered in. Religious traditions have largely clung to their own old ways of thinking or slight modifications of that. Some religious traditions have responded by moving towards a defensive posture, becoming increasingly isolated, fundamentalist, and dogmatic, and others have adapted in other ways. The struggle between the old and new ways of thinking has taken a gigantic toll on conventional religion. The Pew Research Study and Center states that the average members of people in a mainstream Protestant church today are between 60 and 65. Yesterday, someone who is a credible source of information told me that the average age of an Episcopalian in the United States is 70. I don't know if that's true or not, but the Episcopalians are the heart of Protestantism in America. Now, if this trend continues, nuns, those who don't believe in have any religious affiliation at all, will make up the majority of people in our society in 2070. In 1972, 90% of Americans affiliated with Christianity in some form. 90% in 1972. If present trends continue, this group will be around 40% in 2070. That's an unbelievable shift. And as I talk to my colleagues in Winston-Salem, they all tell me the same thing, is that their pews are filled with elderly people who they love, but there is no emergence of a younger generation to fill their shoes. I have a number of relatives who are devout Christians, and I love them dearly, and they're great people, and I would never think of having the audacity to think that I am better than they are or that I have something to teach them or whatever. They are who they are, and I accept that, and they accept me to some extent. But the children of these devout people, Protestant and Catholic, are totally indifferent to organized religion. Totally indifferent. And I'm thinking of my nephew and his wife. For them, the greatest religious experience of the year is to go to Burning Man in Arizona. I don't know if y'all know about Burning Man, but they are devotees of Burning Man in the deserts of Arizona. And for them, if you talk to them about it, it's really a deeply religious experience of community with other people and finding values and relating to people outside of the materialistic standards of the day. I'm sure they don't pay any attention to the nudity they find there. So this is a huge shift. In the U.S., some religious groups have thrived by becoming more and more embedded in their dogma. But that is the least adaptive stance of all, because they are taking a stance that isolates them more and more from mainstream society. So I think I hear an angel calling. You know, this is what happens when you're critical of religion of any kind. You get these divine messages saying that you shouldn't do this. I'm going too far. Or it might be one of my relatives calling me and saying, don't talk about that. But I want to say something that's really important, though. I talk about Catholicism and Protestantism as though they're passé and something in the past and they haven't adapted to the reality of life as we now experience and so forth. And in a way, that's what I do believe personally. But I want to be very clear, I am not disdainful towards other religions. A couple of weeks ago, I participated in the interfaith worship service for Thanksgiving. I contributed to that. I spoke in that. That was, as far as I'm concerned, my civic duty. And I respected everybody who I worked with. I asked them, I told them what I was going to say beforehand to make sure it was okay. I was very respectful of them. I have a dear sister in Ocala, Florida, who she and her husband are immersed in the United Methodist Church. And I would never think to question her beliefs. I have some wonderful cousins down in St. Augustine, Florida, who are deeply entrenched in the Catholic Church. I would never think of questioning their faith, but here we are. We've made certain decisions about life, and we have a different perspective, and I wanted to address that, but I am in no way disrespectful of other religious traditions. Now, as all these changes have occurred, and what, from my perspective, seems to be failures to adapt and dysfunctional attempts to adapt and so on, the religious needs, as I understand it, the religious needs of human beings have not gone away. And regardless of a person, be they atheist, agnostic, Christian, whatever, the religious needs of human beings are, at least to me, universal. By religious needs, what do I mean? I mean the need to expand and develop our capacity to be compassionate and empathetic. I mean the ability to live a principle-centered life. I mean the ability to be resilient in the face of life's challenges, hardships, and losses. I mean by that the need to find peace in a chaotic and strife-filled world. By that, I mean the ability to be at peace with the reality of one's own death and that of others. To acquire maturity in a society based on immaturity. To achieve social and ecological harmony in a world that is destroying the natural system which nourishes us. These and others I can mention are real and constant. And if we do not, as a religious institution, address them, then we're failing, I think, in our role. Science adds to our knowledge of facts. Science tells us what factual reality is. It expands the range of what we know. In contrast, religion is about addressing human needs in a manner which maximizes well-being, peace, and harmony. Science can help us understand our world and ourselves, but does not address the religious needs, the perennial religious needs of human beings. UUs have been at the forefront of trying to adapt to the changes in our society and with science. We UUs, for the last 100 years at least, have adapted to changes in defining ourselves and done so largely by trying to be diverse and pluralistic. In the 1930s, we adapted by trying to become entirely humanistic, by becoming a humanistic religious organization. And in the 1920s, the 1930s, and the 1940s, this was one way of adapting. But currently, our way of adapting is by saying that we are a pluralistic religious institution, that we respect all religious traditions, that we shun none. Paradoxically, we have found unity in our diversity by agreeing to embrace diversity. We have also found coherence and unity as a religious institution by getting involved in social justice actions of all kinds. We have also found unity in being a good place to befriend other really wonderful human beings. And if you ask the typical UU anywhere in the United States what is really great about their congregation, they will say, as people here would, I think, that it's the community of people. And that's real, and that's very important. However, let me go back to something. When we say we embrace all religions, that is good. That's wonderful, and it's true, but it is also confusing. I remember one time years ago when I went to I was working with a person who had a leadership role at one time with the UUA dealing with children and youth. And she had put on a religious program that consisted in taking all the kids in the program to various churches and synagogues and mosques in the city and exposing them to different faith traditions. And I thought, that's wonderful, but how does it help children have a sense of religious identity about what UUs are about? And I think this shows statistically, because if you look at statistics for Unitarian Universalists nationally and historically over a long period of time, we lose our young people when they hit college. People who have been UUs all the way through the religious education program end up other places. And that's a fact. And quite often, not always, but they go to religious institutions that provide them some kind of coherence, some kind of coherent view of what the religious life is all about. Am I being too radical this morning? Okay. Now, what does it mean to say we embrace all religions? You can go around this congregation and you'll see literature like that. What does it mean? Do we admire them but don't get too close? Respect them and even study them, but for God's sake, don't take them seriously? What does it mean? And that way of thinking, as admirable as it is, does not give a real sense of a core unity. Now, you might say at this point, Ed, for the love of God, or something else, why are you talking about this subject? I'll tell you why. Because I'm an old man now, and I've seen a lot of UU congregations, both directly and indirectly. And I can tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, that congregations that do not offer people a vision that represents the needs, the religious needs of people, that does not have some kind of spirituality, those congregations do not fare very well in the long term. And I can cite examples of UU congregations filled with wonderful people, filled with great people, well-educated people, but they have no core. And over time, they dissolve, they have problems, they just don't do very well. And those congregations, those UU congregations who offer people a viable sense of spirituality, they thrive. They have a center, and people feel that. There is a there. People experience that, and it makes a difference. Now, there's another way to look at this issue of religion versus non-religion, or no religion at all versus the diversity of religion, etc. Imagine if all religions are simply the way human beings have sought to address the religious needs of people, as I talked about them earlier, down through the centuries. And would it not be inevitable that these religions are different in so many ways because they all arose in different historical, political, and cultural contexts? In the context of different languages, in the different context of the cultures that were very different. Is it inevitable that they were trying to do something that was a similar project, but they did it in different ways? Are we not, all of us, part of one species? Do we not all face the same dilemmas? We're born, we're thrust into a situation that we didn't create. We have to deal with life as it is dealt us, and we face old age and death and all the challenges in between. We are all in the same boat. We are all striving to have our similar needs met through what has been called religion. Now, I'll make a second claim. What people have needed and sought from religion is not the religion itself, and certainly not the dogma, but it is the wisdom that might be found in those religious traditions. Wisdom is whatever gives us guidance for the skillful living of our lives. So what we need is not religion, but wisdom. Yes, wisdom has traditionally come from religious sources, but wisdom, in fact, can come from any source, religious or otherwise. Wisdom must always fit into the details of the individual. There is no such thing as wisdom that is true for everyone. The UUA has acknowledged the value of wisdom, although it's been something that hasn't been paid much attention to. The Unitarian Universalist congregations affirm and promote 7 principles, soon to be 8. And part of that statement is that these principles stand within a living tradition. And that living tradition comes from 6 sources. And one of those sources is, and I quote, wisdom from the world's religions which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life. Additionally, the UUA has recently put an enormous amount of time and effort into something called the Article 2 Study Commission. And under that, in C2.3, there's a section called Inspiration. And it reads as follows. As Unitarian Universalists, we draw upon and are inspired by the full depth and breadth of sacred understandings as experienced by humanity, grateful for the religious lineages we inherit and the pluralism which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. So the point of view I'm espousing is rooted in the Unitarian Universalist tradition. So anyway, I wanted to give you a little context for why I am doing what I am doing. But now I would like to shift and talk about wisdom as seen from an elder. And let me share with you where I got this idea. My dear wife, Alfie, sitting not far in front of me, she doesn't like right there. Her father died when she was young. And several years passed, and the father was replaced by a stepfather, and the stepfather was not always a kind or gentle man, shall we say. He's about 91, is that right, Alfie? He's 91 today. And he has gone through some physical difficulties and struggles, but he's still going strong at 91. But a couple of months ago, he was talking with Alphys. Alphys calls him periodically. And before he hung up the phone, he said, tell Allie and Lily, those are my daughters, our daughters, Allie and Lily and Ed, that I love them very much. Now, that is, I guess, an unremarkable statement. But if you had known him before, you would understand that that was like a 180-degree turn for him. That he was humble, that he was soft, that he was loving, was a way that he has not been for most of his life. Why was that? Well, it was his age, and that he had lived long enough and gone through enough suffering and difficulties and seen enough where he was able to speak at last from a place of wisdom. And I think the wisdom of our elders is very, very undervalued in our society. I wish to goodness that there was a way in which the wisdom of our elders could be connected with all the young people in our denomination and in our congregations. That would be a wonderful thing. But I digress. I'd like to talk briefly, as I end my remarks, about wisdom found from a book called Tuesdays with Morrie. Is anybody familiar with that book? You're familiar? And it's unsurprising that you are, because that book topped the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list for 23 weeks in 2000. And it has remained on the New York Times bestseller list for more than 4 years after that, and is a perennial favorite. And as you know, it was written by a guy named Mitch Albom. And Mitch had a series of visits with his former sociology professor named Morrie Swartz, at a time when Swartz was slowly dying of ALS. So he saw life in a very real and penetrating way, beyond all the delusions that most of us are walking through most of the time. And as I end my remarks, I'd like to share a few quotes from him. One of the things Mitch said was that the culture that we live in does not make people feel good about themselves. The contrary. He wrote, or he spoke these words, "We've got a lot of brainwashing going on in our country. Things that are repeated over and over again. And that's what we do in this country. Owning things is good. More money is good. More property is good. More commercialism is good. We repeat it and have it repeated to us over and over until nobody bothers to even think otherwise. The average person is so fogged up by all of this that he or she has no perspective whatsoever on what is really important any longer." He goes on, "There are so many people so hungry for love that they will accept and do accept substitutes. They embrace material things and sort of expect a hug back, but it never works. You can't substitute material things for love or for gentleness or for tenderness or a sense of friendship. I can tell you," he said, "I'm sitting here dying when you most need it. Neither money nor power will give you the feeling you're looking for, no matter how much of them you might have. The loving relationships we have, the universe around us, we take these things for granted." And so what are the consequences, according to Morrie? So many people, he said, walk around with a meaningless life, half asleep, even when they're busy doing things they think are important. And that is because they are chasing the wrong things. And you have to be strong enough to say, if the culture doesn't work, don't buy it. Create your own. What is the real thing? Well, according to Morrie, the way you get meaning into your life is to devote yourself to loving, to caring for others, the community around you, and creating something that gives you that sense of meaning and purpose. Giving to other people makes me feel alive. Not my car or my house, not what I look like in the mirror. When I give my time, when I make someone smile, when they are feeling sad, then I feel alive. And forgiveness was very important for him and for the life that he envisioned. He wrote or said, "It's not just other people we need to forgive. we also need to forgive ourselves for all the things we did not do, for all the things we should have done. You can't get stuck in the regrets of what should have happened. And feeling sorry for yourself. He had quite a bit to say about that. I've thought, he said, about all the people I knew who spend many of their waking hours feeling sorry for themselves. How useful it would be to put a daily limit on self-pity. Just a few tearful moments, then on with the day. I give myself a good cry if I need it, but then I concentrate on the good things still in my life. I don't allow myself more self-pity than that. A little each morning, a few tears, that is all. He had some wonderful things to say about aging, and one of them was, everybody knows they're going to die, but nobody believes it. If we did, we would do things differently. Aging is not decay, he wrote, it's growth. It's more than the negative that one day you will die. It's the positive that you understand you're going to die and that you live a better life because of it. The truth is, he wrote or spoke, part of me is every age. I'm a 3-year-old, I'm a 5-year-old, I'm a 37-year-old, I'm a 50-year-old. I've been through all of them and I know what it's like. I delight in being a child when it's appropriate. I delight in being a wise old man when it's appropriate. Think of all I can be up until every age, up until my own. And then finally, for him, the greatest thing was learning how to love. The most important thing in life, he said, is to learn how to get out love, to give love, and to let love come back in. We don't think we deserve love. We think if we let love in, we'll become too soft. But a wise man once told me, love is the only rational act. Well, as a final quote from him, I can't resist this one dealing with the unity of all people. He had something powerful that's dear to my heart, which is to realize our common humanity, to have that in front of us all the time, that we're all part of one family, really. The problem is that we don't believe we are as alike as we actually are. Whites, blacks, Catholics, Protestants, men, women, if we saw each other as more alike, we might be very eager to join in the one big human family that is in this world and to care about that family the way we care about our own. But believe me, when you are dying, you'll see it's true. We all have the same beginning, birth, and we all have the same end, death. So how can we be different? Build a community of those you love and who love you. Wisdom is valuable because we need help. We cannot do it alone. We need the guidance of wise people who came before us and wise people who are around us and the support of people who will engage with us on trying to live lives guided by wisdom. I look forward to exploring the subject with you further in the months ahead.